Alright y'all, go ahead and fire that Photoshop up. We have got a pleasant surprise today. We will be creating this amazing paper cutout technique in Photoshop. The cool thing is I learned this a few years ago by an amazing YouTube channel called Made by Mighty. And that's where I think this technique first came out. I know a few other people that have tried to create this on their YouTube channels, and now I'm going to use it on this YouTube channel. And the reason being is I'm gonna have a little couple extra steps in there to create some more interesting texture and a little more grunge, a little bit more interesting and less elegant. Not saying that what Made by Mighty is not cool, but this should be just a different take on this technique.
What?
The first thing you're going to want to do is pick up some textures. I went to texturelabs.org. It's a great resource with free textures, and picked up these paper textures over there. I will put the exact names of these textures so you can follow along. There are 3 of them, and I put 2 of them in my effects folder, so go ahead and make yourself an effects folder or just put them on top of your type for now. And talking about type, you're going to want to create a new layer, create your logo. You could even drop something in from Illustrator, vector logo, whatever you want to use, but I'm using the logo called Paper today with a font in Bebas New, which is a condensed font so that it fits the artboard nicely, or image size I use when I'm creating logos. And the dimensions are 16 inches wide by 9 inches tall at 200 ppi. Now the background, I just used an adjustment layer and I have this off-white gray background. What you're going to want to do once you have your type layer ready to go is double click on that type layer and bring up layer styles. Now we're going to be using layer styles quite a bit in this tutorial, which is great because if you're new to them, this is a great way to dive in and start to really figure out what these things do. First thing you're going to want to do is hit up the blending options, bevel and emboss. Go ahead and reset to default down here, and then up here on style, we're going to want to change it to inner bevel if it hasn't done so already, and then leave this at smooth, and our size can be 250 pixels and the soften can be cranked up to 16. And then we're going to go ahead and figure out our angles, and for this tutorial I'm just going to keep it at -140, but I'm going to turn off global light, and we're going to do that on pretty much everything. So you can keep your negative degree at something around 140. Let's do -135 just to switch it up a bit. And then the altitude is going to be all the way at 30. And then the highlight, you can switch over to overlay. And then on overlay, we'll have a color of white. And then we'll go ahead and drop that opacity down to 15%. And then the shadow, we can switch this over to linear burn. And then the color, we're gonna go ahead and pick a color that we used in our logo, and then we're just gonna drop the darkness quite substantially on that to where it's almost complete black. And then on the opacity, we'll drop that as well, something in between 10 and 15% usually does the trick. 13% looks really, really good. And then the next layer style that we're gonna be messing around with is the inner shadow. So go to inner shadow and then reset to default. And then we're gonna go up here to the blend mode. And on the blend mode, we're gonna take that to normal. And then the color, we're just gonna crank that over to white. And then the opacity, we're actually gonna switch to 20%. And then on the angle, we're gonna uncheck use global light and then drop our angle to 135. Just make sure your angle is consistent. Think of this as light coming from over here, and then our shadows are gonna be on this side of our letters. Distance is gonna be only 1 pixel. Choke 0%. And then the size is going to be 1 pixel. And now the next thing we need to do is go hit up our drop shadow. So go to drop shadow, and then on drop shadow, reset to default. So we're starting from scratch. And then the blend mode, we can switch this to screen and then uncheck global light. And then we're going to drop this to 135. And then the distance is going to be 1 pixel. Spread we can keep at 0. And then the size is going to be 1 pixel. And then hit OK. Now we need to make a copy of that layer we just created. So hit Command-J hotkey to copy, or actually duplicate layer. And now we just need to get rid of what we just did. And the easy way to do that is to hover over the effects logo or icon, right click, clear layer styles. And now we're also going to get rid of our fill. So you go up here to fill and drop this to 0%. And now we can double click and go to our layer styles. And on our layer styles, we got to uncheck blend clipped layers as group. And from here, we're going to go to inner shadow. And then our inner shadow blend mode is going to be overlay. And then we're going to keep the color at white. And we're going to put our opacity at 75%. And then on the global light, make sure that's unchecked still. And then we're using our same angle, -135, 1 pixel, 0% choke, 1 pixel on the size. And then we're cool. Now let's go back up to bevel and emboss. And on bevel and emboss, we're going to do an outer level. So you're going to switch inner level to outer level. Keep it smooth, 100%, direction up, size 50 pixels or close to it. And then soften can stay at 16, but our angle is going to be the opposite side. So our angle is going to be the opposite of -135. So I'm just going to keep it here at 34 degrees. Make sure global light is unchecked. Altitude can stay at 0. Highlight can be overlay with a white color. And then we're just going to increase the percentage up to 50%. And then our shadow mode can be 0%. We're just basically getting rid of that. Now let's go check out the drop shadow. And on drop shadow, we're going to switch the blend mode to overlay, the color to white, uncheck global light, and then make sure that our negative degree is at whatever you're using, -135. Now the distance is going to be increased, so we can do something around 100. Our spread can be 0, and then our size is going to be 100 or close to it. And then the opacity, we can go ahead and drop at 16%. Or 17. Close enough. Then hit OK. And now we're going to duplicate that layer one more time. Command J to duplicate. Get rid of our effects layer. Hover over effects. Right click. Clear layer style. And that gets rid of everything we just did. And then on our new layer style, we're going to double click. Go to bevel and emboss. And then we're going to do outer bevel. Keep it at smooth. And then on the size, we're just going to drop the sizing down to 38 pixels. Soften can be 0. Uncheck our global light, make sure it's unchecked. But now we got to bring our degree back to -135. Altitude increases to 30. Highlight can go to 0%, but our shadow, we're going to switch this to multiply because it's going to be a shadow. And then the opacity is going to be around 25%. Actually, let's do a little bit less. Let's just do 21%. And then hit OK. Now this layer, we're going to use it as a clipping mask, but before we clip it to this next layer, we're going to just hit V on the keyboard and then just hit your arrow key down 1 or 2 times and then to the left 1 or 2 times. And now I'm going to clip this to the bottom layer, this layer below it, by hitting Alt or Option plus Command and G. And now you can see we have a layer of a nice little shadow starting to attach to the type. And now on that layer, we're going to go up to filter, and on filter, blur, and blur to Gaussian blur. And it's totally cool. Let it convert to a smart object. And on the smart object, we're just going to do 1 pixel or something close to 1 pixel. That's going to smooth out our shadow. Hit OK. Now we're going to duplicate layer one more time, Command J, and then we're going to attach it to the bottom layer, Alt or Option, Command G, and then we're going to double click on the Gaussian blur on our filter since it's already been created. And now we're going to increase the pixels, actually make the blur more blurry. You can go to something like 7, hit OK, and then we're going to do this again, Command J, and then we're going to hit Option or Alt, Command G, clip it to that layer again, double click Gaussian blur, and on Gaussian blur we're going to increase to 9 pixels, hit OK, and we're going to do it again, Command J, and then we're going to clip it to the layer again, Alt or Option Command G, and then double click Gaussian blur, and then on Gaussian blur, we're going to increase it to 11 pixels, hit OK, and then we're going to make another copy, Command J, and then we're going to do the same thing, Alt Option Command G to clip it one more time, double click Gaussian blur, and duplicate it to 20 pixels, and then hit OK, and one more time, Command J to duplicate layer, Alt or Option Command G, double click Gaussian blur, and then we're just going to crank this up to 27.5 pixels and then hit OK. And now this is an optional layer style that you can do. Sometimes this looks good and sometimes it's not necessary. Made by Mighty does this, so you can go ahead and double click that layer to get to layer style, and then you're going to go to satin, and then on satin reset to default, but we're going to change the blend mode to soft light, and then the opacity or the color can go to white. And it's just good. It's going to basically make some interesting highlights. And then the opacity we can drop down to like whatever, I don't know. Let's just do 17%. And then the angle, we're just going to create an angle similar to what we had before. So I'm just going to do 35. And then from here, we can increase the distance to something in the 90s, 95. And then the size, we'll do the same thing, something we'll do around, I don't know, 90. And then the contour can stay the same. And I think you can uncheck anti-alias. All right, cool. And then just hit OK. Now we can add a little bit of a drop shadow or just shadow in general. And the easiest way to do that is by going to our bottommost text layer, hit Command J, and then on that bottom layer, we're going to go ahead and get rid of everything. So on your effects layer style, right click over the effects icon, clear layer styles, and now we just have this paper text. And then on this paper text, we're just going to convert to smart object. And then on this text layer, we're going to turn this to just a black text. So go up to your color. If your character window is not out, you can go up to Windows and then go to character. But if it is, we're going to change that color to black, hit OK, and then convert to smart object. Right click on that layer, convert to smart object. And then we're going to go up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and kind of make ourselves a little nice blurry shadow. Something around, we'll do 12 pixels. So we can drop the opacity, make it a lot less strong, something around 20. And then we can actually move it down a little bit. So I'm going to hit V on the keyboard and then just drop it down with the arrows, bottom and then to the left, since we have our light coming from the upper right, like that. And now if you go and zoom in, Command plus, you can see this nice edge and a nice shadow that we've created. So it looks like there's a highlight going all the way down this line. Now I'm going to hit Command negative, get back to a decent size.
Time out, y'all. I totally forgot to mention this, but if you're digging this and you've learned something, please just hit that like button. I appreciate it.
And from here, we're going to go ahead and start making our textures. So let's start with our background. I picked this texture that has a line or a fold going through it. I thought it would be a lot more interesting. So that bottom layer is going to be a texture. Go ahead and hit Command T and then hold down Shift and Option, and then we're going to make this bigger so that it fills our whole entire artboard. And then hit OK or Enter when you're good with it. Now this top layer we're going to use, well, this top texture is this more crinkled paper, which I thought was really cool. We're going to use a mask of the type in order to create texture within the type itself. Now it sounds complicated, but it's not. But all you're going to want to do is make sure that this is covering our type. And we're going to leave that layer right there for now. And now we're going to go back down to one of the type layers. And then over the T, go ahead and hold Command and then left click. And that's going to make a selection. And now we're going to use this selection in a mask. And to do that, we're going back up to that crinkled paper texture, hit the little mask icon, and now we have this texture ready to go within the type and everything that we've already created. But we need to reduce the size of the mask so that some of those highlights on the lines actually show through. And to do that is make sure you're on the mask and then go up to filter. We're going to go to other, and then we're going to go to minimum, and this is going to minimize the size of that mask. And you can go ahead and put in 2 pixels. Now that doesn't look cool right now, but it's going to look cool once we change the blend mode. So now we can go ahead and see what blend mode is going to work for this situation. So sometimes darken will work, sometimes multiply, but I think this time color burn is going to look pretty cool. Anything between color burn and linear dot or linear burn is going to work. But I kind of want to work with this high saturation, and I think that's going to do the trick. And now the cool thing is, if you don't like the position of the texture, you can go ahead and uncheck or get rid of the link by clicking on the link, and then you can move around that paper to where you want it. But I kind of like it where it was, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it there because it's kind of cool how we have a little bit of a fold here, and then we have this line going through the A. And then I'm going to just relink it by linking it just to make sure that it doesn't move or do anything funky. And from here, we can go ahead and add a little bit more shadow, but do it with the brush so that it's a lot more nuanced. So we're going to go to New Layer, and we're going to clip that layer above our shadow layers that we created. So Alt Option Command G, get out a brush, just get a nice round brush, and then we're just basically going to do some nice little painting with black in areas that we want to emphasize the shadows a little bit. So I'm just kind of painting nonchalantly where shadows would be in this particular situation. Now, if it's a little strong, don't worry, because we will be adjusting the opacity like that, and then we'll go ahead and drop the opacity, and we're just going to do that one more time, clipping it with Alt Option Command G, and then we're just going to paint, and then we're just going to drop the opacity. And now one other thing we can do is have a curves layer, adjustment layer above the layers we just did. We're going to clip that, Alt Option Command G. We're just going to darken it a little with the curve to make it a little bit more poppy. And then we're just going to drop these two layers as well, the opacity for those shadows just a tiny bit because they were a little strong. And then up here on that one piece of paper that we haven't used yet, we're going to hit Command T. Actually, we're going to make it visible. Command T, and then we're just going to make sure this fits our whole entire canvas. But it's a black piece of paper and I want it white, so I'm just going to invert it by hitting Command I. And then from here we can play with a cool blend mode just to add a little bit more texture to it. So I'm just using multiply, and then I'm going to reduce the opacity just a tad, like that. Now I notice we have a little bit too much light coming on the outside edges. It just doesn't look right. So I'm going to go back down and adjust that layer, which is probably, it's going to be that type layer with a lot of the layer styles. And that bevel and emboss is a little too strong, so I'm just going to double click on that. And now we're already at bevel and emboss, and we can just kind of reduce what we got going. So let's go ahead and drop the opacity for the overlay a tad. So I have that at 36%. Let's see how that looks. I'm just going to turn it on and off, and that's a little better. So it was a little strong before, and I feel like it's a lot better now. And then the last thing we really want to do is add a little noise to the whole entire thing. And to do that is you're going to hold down Option and then click the new layer down on the bottom right, call it Noise. And then on Noise, we're going to drop the mode to Overlay, fill with Overlay Neutral Color, hit OK, go up to Filter, and then on Filter, we can go ahead and add Noise. And on the Noise, let's see, 9 seems a little too strong, so I'm going to go to 7. Let's try 6. I think that's a little better. And then we can always drop the opacity as well. And this just kind of ties the whole thing together, makes it a little better. And this effects layer, I might add a little bit of light on the upper right just to emphasize lights coming from that direction. So I'm using a curve, increasing the light, Command I on the mask, hitting B for brush, and then I'm just going to paint a little bit of light back in over here. And now I want to do one more curve, so I'm going to adjustment layer, curves, and then on curves I'm just going to drop the light a tad and then hit Command I, and then maybe paint a little bit more darkness on this side like that. And then let's just go check out that layer, the paper layer that was on multiply. Maybe we can increase that just a little bit like that, and I feel like we have a really cool cutout. And you can always go ahead and mess around with the hue. So let me just show you guys really quick. So go to adjustment layer, hue saturation. We're just going to clip it, Option Command G, and then we can just play around with the saturation. So if you wanted to start to turn or change the colors of your whole composition, this is the easiest way to do it. We definitely rocked the layer styles in this tutorial. I hope you guys learned a ton. Try this, try it out. It's just a good way to get your head around how layer styles work. And I hope you learned something. If you did, hit that like button, and I'll see you on the next tutorial. Peace.